"That's my daughter." The room went still. Not a fork clinked. Not a whisper dared move. Because the man who just stepped forward wasn't just anyone. He was the billionaire owner of the Crystal Haven Hotel. His voice, calm and deliberate, sliced through the stunned silence like thunder through still air. "But we'll come back to that moment. First, where are you watching from? New York? Lagos? London? Drop your city in the comments. Because this story, it's about to hit everyone, everywhere. What looked like a luxury hotel drama, just a rich guest humiliating a black waitress, turned out to be something else entirely. A powerful story, a moment of justice, a lesson in class, dignity, and hidden strength. Would you have done what she did? Stick around. Because what begins with public shame ends in a twist no one saw coming. And trust us, you'll remember this one. The Crystal Haven Hotel shimmered in the heart of Miami's skyline, a glass gem catching the last gold rays of sunset. Inside, the grand dining hall glowed with elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung like stars, casting reflections onto the marble floors and polished stemware. The air was thick with scents of aged wine, white truffle, and whispered money. It was the kind of place where the wealthy glided, where time seemed to slow down for the elite. But someone was moving through it like she didn't quite belong, yet somehow, more than anyone else ever could. Her name was Amara Brooks. At 24, she glided between tables with the quiet grace of a ballerina. Her mahogany skin glowed beneath chandelier light, and though her eyes carried the weight of exhaustion, there was a spark in them, fierce, unshakable. Her black and white uniform clung from the toll of a double shift. Her shoes pinched. Her feet ached. But Amara never flinched. Crystal Haven demanded perfection, and she delivered it. Tray after tray, smile after smile. To the guests, she was background noise. Polite, efficient, but beautiful enough to be noticed and dismissed. What none of them knew, what no one could have guessed, was that Amara didn't need this job. She wasn't here for the paycheck or the struggle. She was the daughter of Malcolm Brooks, the billionaire real estate tycoon whose empire glittered along the East Coast skyline. But she never flaunted it. She used her mother's last name, insisted no one at the hotel know who she was, begged her father not to interfere, and to his credit, he hadn't, except for one promise. He would always be close, watching, in case the world she wanted to understand tried to break her. Because this wasn't about rebellion. Amara wasn't here to prove anything to them. She was here for herself, to feel what it meant to be seen as just a server, to know the truth of how the world treats those it believes are beneath it. And tonight, the world was about to show its worst face, and Amara was about to show hers. Her hands, though manicured, knew the rhythm of labor. Her heart, full of dreams, beat steady with purpose. And so, like every night before, Amara moved through the glittering halls of privilege with the quiet discipline of someone who had learned to wear grace like armor. Her smile, unwavering. Her posture, flawless. Her pride, tucked deep beneath layers of professionalism, visible only to those who cared to look. And in places like this, few ever did. Across the room, a jazz quartet played something smooth and sultry, barely cutting through the polite murmur of dinner conversation. A laugh broke too loud at one table, jarring, awkward. It didn't belong in a place like this. Neither, some might say, did she. At table 14, Amara approached with practiced poise. A silver-haired couple, polished and pleasant, nodded as she presented the amuse-bouche. "Exquisite," the woman said, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "Tell the chef, won't you?" Amara bowed with a soft smile. "Of course, ma'am." It was a small moment, a rare kindness. These little gestures, though fleeting, made the long hours bearable. But even those moments couldn't breach the invisible wall, the space between her and them. She was always the girl, young lady, or worst of all, you there. Never Amara. Back in the service station, she refilled water glasses in a smooth, automatic rhythm. Her colleague Jamal passed by with a wink. "Almost there," he grinned. "Still 2 hours," she replied, smirking. "But who's counting?" The friendly banter helped, reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. Still, the solitude of the role lingered. There was always a line, the one between the ones being served and those serving. Amara knew that line intimately, because she had stood on both sides of it. The clock inched toward 8 p.m. The tempo shifted. The room buzzed with new energy as fresh reservations trickled in. Local celebrities, Instagram influencers, children of hedge fund titans. Amara scanned the seating chart, brushing a wrinkle from her apron. Her next table was in the east corner, the VIP section. She didn't care who it was. She never did. What mattered was how she served. To her, every table was a performance, every interaction a piece of art. The symmetry of a fork, the way the crystal glass caught the chandelier light, how to set a dish without the slightest sound. And then it happened. A shift in the air, a ripple across the room. The host at the entrance straightened, eyes fixed on the doors. Nearby staff stiffened. Murmurs rippled like waves. Amara turned and saw her. Vanessa Carlyle, tall, blonde, draped in an emerald dress sculpted to perfection. Diamonds glittered at her neck. Her heels clicked on marble like a slow, ominous metronome. A name that lived in magazine covers and dinner party whispers. Influencer, heiress, trouble. She didn't walk in. She arrived, like she owned the building, the block, the air. Without so much as a glance at the host, she was guided to the prime VIP table, east corner, just as Amara expected. She sat down, legs crossing with meticulous ease. Her phone was out before the chair even finished shifting. Tap, scroll, tap. No eye contact, no awareness, no care. Amara steadied herself, inhaled. Just another guest, she reminded herself. Another drink order, another moment to serve with pride. She moved forward, tray in hand, shoulders squared against the exhaustion whispering through her bones. Her voice, when she spoke, was warm and smooth, crafted for exactly this kind of moment. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to Crystal Haven. May I get you started with something to drink?" Vanessa didn't even blink. "Sparkling water. No ice. And make it quick. I don't have all night." The words weren't rude. Not exactly. They were empty, cold. The kind of command you give a machine, not a person. She flicked her hand, dismissive, detached. Her eyes never once lifted from her screen. Amara paused for a second. A breath. A sting. Then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She turned to fetch the drink, but something clung to her, tight in her chest. The tone, the absence of basic decency, the way she hadn't even looked up. It was subtle, but it left a mark. It was the same silent truth that echoed every night in rooms like this. No matter how flawless your service, how poised your delivery, some people only see the uniform, never the person wearing it. As the soft jazz spilled into the room, wine flowed like liquid gold, and laughter danced beneath glittering chandeliers, Amara walked steadily back to table 14, one hand cradling a single glass of sparkling water. She had no idea that the next 60 seconds would flip the entire evening on its head, not just for her, but for everyone watching. Vanessa Carlyle remained seated like a queen carved from arrogance. Every angle of her body spoke fluency in superiority. Perfect posture, phone in hand, diamond necklace shimmering under the crystal lights with every imperceptible tilt of her chin, sparkling, not as ornament, but as a statement. She didn't glance up. She didn't have to. In Vanessa's world, this hotel existed to orbit around her whims. She wasn't cruel, at least not openly. She was indifferent, and indifference cuts deeper than insults. Amara reached the table with steady grace, her tray perfectly balanced. The condensation trailed down the cool glass like it had all the time in the world. She gently placed the drink on the table, positioning it with care beside Vanessa's untouched silverware. "Here you are, ma'am," she said, her tone smooth and respectful, polished like the floor beneath her feet. But then it happened. A careless reach. Vanessa, still glued to her screen, stretched out to grab the glass without looking. She misjudged the distance. The rim tipped. Splash. The water spilled. First, across the crisp linen. Then, over the edge of the table, straight onto Amara's chest. Gasps cracked through the air like lightning. A chain reaction of audible shock. The jazz faltered. Just a beat, just a breath, but enough to mark that something had shifted. Every conversation at every table stuttered and slowed. Vanessa finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed, not in alarm, not in apology, in annoyance, as if she were the victim. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she snapped, voice slicing clean through the room. "Can't you do anything right?" The insult struck like a slap. A woman in pearls paused mid-bite. A suited man lowered his wine, brow drawn. A busboy near the dessert cart stopped mid-step. Amara stood frozen, her blouse soaked and clinging, the chill biting into her skin. But it wasn't the cold that made her chest tighten. It was the humiliation. All those eyes, all that weight. Still, she kept her voice steady. "I'm very sorry, ma'am," she said gently. "Let me get you another." But Vanessa waved the words away like an insect in her periphery. "Do they hire just anyone here?" she scoffed, her voice rising deliberately. She leaned back with theatrical disdain, making sure her disgust carried. "You're a walking disaster. I come to this hotel for excellence, not this level of incompetence." More guests turned. Some stared. Others glanced down at their napkins, pretending not to see. One young woman casually tilted her phone toward the scene. Camera app open. Recording. Amara bent slightly, napkin in hand, dabbing at the spill on the table with careful, practiced hands. "I'll clean this up right away," she said, voice low but firm. Not because she felt small, but because she refused to meet the gaze of someone who fed on dominance. "I'll bring a fresh glass. No charge." Vanessa laughed. Not politely. Mockingly. "Oh, how generous of you. On the house. Like that makes up for your mess." Her voice sharpened like glass under pressure. "Sweetheart," she added with venomous sweetness, "girls like you don't belong in places like this. You're clearly out of your depth. Stick to fast food, or whatever they call basic service these days." She tilted her head, dripping with mock sympathy. "This place is above your level." The words weren't shouted. They didn't have to be. They slid through the room like daggers wrapped in velvet. But Amara didn't flinch. She didn't plead or defend. She straightened. Her wet blouse clung to her like a second skin. Her shoulders back, chin lifted, and in that moment she looked more royal than any diamond in the room. She met Vanessa's gaze head-on, not with anger, not with hate, with calm, with clarity, and in that gaze was something stronger than fury, power restrained. "Yes, ma'am. I'll have that drink replaced right away," Amara said calmly, then turned and walked toward the kitchen. But Vanessa wasn't finished. With a flick of her wrist, so casual it felt rehearsed, she reached for the glass of red wine just placed on her table. Then she threw it. The stemware shattered against the marble. The wine splashed across Amara's back. A crimson wave, bold, deliberate, and humiliating. The deep red soaked her blouse and skirt, painting her in slow-moving streaks like blood spilled on fresh snow. The sound of the crash rang through the room like a gunshot. Gasps. A groan. The kind of collective reaction that comes only when a line has been crossed so clearly no one can pretend otherwise. Wine trickled down the back of her legs. Her apron turned from crisp white to dark and soaked. A few droplets bled onto the pristine floor, forming a dramatic arc of red against ivory tile. And Vanessa! She laughed. A shrill, delighted cackle. "Maybe that'll teach you to pay attention," she called, her voice high with satisfaction. Still seated, still smirking. A queen in her own court. Amara stopped mid-step. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. But her hands, now clenched at her sides, trembled. Not with fear. Not even with shock. With restraint. The kind of restraint that turns bones into steel and pride into armor. For a full second she said nothing. She just stared ahead, her soaked blouse clinging to her skin like it was holding her together. Then she exhaled, slow, controlled, and continued walking. No rush, no collapse, no theatrics. If anything, she stood taller, as if the wine hadn't soaked her but baptized her, as if the humiliation had only sharpened her dignity. Back at the service station, Jamal stared wide-eyed. "What the hell just happened?" he whispered. But Amara didn't answer. She hung the soaked towel on the hook, her shoulders rigid, then reached for a clean cloth like it was just another shift, just another night. In the kitchen, one of the line cooks muttered, "Man, that woman's sick in the head." Phone screens glowed. Videos were already being uploaded. The moment was spreading, fast. Out in the dining room, Vanessa reclined in her chair, chatting as though nothing had happened. "Honestly," she said to the woman who had just arrived beside her, voice raised enough for half the room to hear, "some people just don't belong in places like this. She should be grateful she even has a job here." But something had changed. The atmosphere had shifted. The laughter that once bubbled so easily now felt forced, uncomfortable. Guests watched in silence. Some whispered. Some shook their heads. A man near the window leaned toward his wife. "That girl handled it better than I would have," he said. And in the far corner, behind a frosted glass partition, a tall man in a navy suit quietly set down his glass of bourbon. His silver-flecked brows knit together. His jaw tightened. Because for the first time all evening, Malcolm Brooks wasn't thinking about the deal he'd come to close or the luxury condo plans on his tablet. He was watching something personal, something wrong, something that made his blood boil. And as he reached into his jacket pocket and tapped a number labeled "Manager, Crystal Haven," the air shifted again. The storm had begun. Back at the service station, Amara stood like a statue in a soaked uniform, the back of her shirt still wet, still clinging, her fists pale-knuckled, Her eyes, unreadable. The wine wasn't what stung. It was the sound. Vanessa's laughter. That triumphant, piercing shriek, like a victory cry in a war only one person knew they were fighting. It hadn't been an accident. Not a mistake. It was a message. I can do this to you, and you can't stop me. But Vanessa had chosen the wrong woman, because Amara wasn't fragile. She wasn't ashamed. She was quiet and controlled, but inside her something powerful was rising. Not revenge. Dignity. She pressed a clean towel against a stained blouse, expression calm. "Cover table 14, she said softly to Jamal. "I'll be back in a few." Jamal nodded, still too stunned to reply. From the kitchen doorway, Chef Mario peeked out, thick brows raised. "Everything okay?" he asked. Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The world would hear her answer very soon. Out in the dining hall, the air had changed. The illusion of elegance had fractured, like fine china cracked beneath invisible pressure. Where once there was laughter and soft music, now there was tension. Murmurs replaced conversation. Eyes darted. Linen napkins masked whispered judgments. At table 14, Vanessa Carroll lounged in her chair, the picture of smug satisfaction. She leaned toward her friend and murmured something meant to be clever. Soft giggles followed, oblivious to the ripple of unease around them. But not everyone was amused. A woman in a navy sheath dress leaned across the table to her husband. "She should be asked to leave," she hissed. He nodded, jaw tight, still watching Vanessa with a look of stunned disbelief, as if trying to understand what kind of person took joy in cruelty. And in the far booth near the frosted glass partition, Malcolm Brooks hadn't moved, but the steel in his jawline had only sharpened. His fingers were steepled beneath his chin, elbows resting lightly on the white linen tablecloth. He had watched everything, the spill, the insults, the thrown wine, and still he hadn't moved. Not yet, because Amara had asked him not to interfere, not to rescue. She had asked for the dignity of handling her own battles. But watching his daughter be publicly humiliated, assaulted, in his own hotel had drawn a line he was no longer willing to respect. The storm was no longer stirring. It had arrived. He pressed a single button on his phone and said only one word: "Now." A moment later, Daniel, the hotel manager, appeared beside Vanessa's table. His suit immaculate, his expression strained. "Miss Carroll," he said, offering a smile far tighter than polite. "Mr. Brooks would like a word." Vanessa blinked, mildly annoyed by the interruption. "Who?" she asked flatly. "Malcolm Brooks," Daniel replied. "The owner of Crystal Haven." A beat of silence. Then Vanessa's expression shifted. Her brows lifted with a flicker of interest. Finally, she thought, someone who recognizes class. She rose gracefully, smoothing the emerald satin of her gown over her hips. She assumed she was being escorted to accept a compliment, or at worst, receive an apology. She never noticed the glances that followed her, some disapproving, some curious, but all aware. Her heels clicked confidently across the marble floor like a metronome counting down. She didn't see Amara, who was just now re-entering the kitchen, rinsing red stains from her hands with trembling fingers and a cold stream of water. In the private lounge, Malcolm stood, tall, composed, immovable. Silver streaked the sides of his close-cropped hair. His navy suit fit like command armor, and his face was carved from stone. Vanessa's confident gait slowed. Her practiced smile twitched. Something in his posture, the cold clarity of his eyes, told her that whatever she'd planned to say would fall apart before it reached her lips. She opened her mouth. "Mr. Brooks, I just wanted to say, I know exactly what you did," Malcolm interrupted. "Soft, controlled, unyielding." Vanessa blinked. Her confidence faltered. I didn't mean," she began. "I watched all of it," he said, voice like a velvet hammer. "You came into my hotel. You insulted my staff. You assaulted one of them, in front of witnesses. And then you laughed." Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came. Malcolm took a single step forward, not aggressive, just deliberate. "And that staff member," he continued, "she's not just an employee. She's my daughter." The words dropped like a seismic blow. Silence. Vanessa's world realigned in a single instant. Everything, the giggles, the drink, the performance, suddenly felt childish, amateur, dangerous. Her mouth opened, closed again. Her eyes darted, to the door, to Daniel, to anywhere that wasn't Malcolm's burning, unwavering gaze. I didn't know," she stammered. "She spilled water," she added, grasping for justification. "I saw it," Malcolm said. "She didn't. You did. And when you embarrassed yourself, you chose to blame her. Then you threw wine at her." He paused. "That's not a mistake, Miss Carroll. That's character." Her cheeks flamed, the color rising like a burn from within. Not shame, not quite. She didn't know shame, but exposure, that she understood. Her power in the room, her grip on the narrative, it was all an illusion. And now, the room was watching her unravel. Back in the kitchen, Amara stood at the sink. She scrubbed at her apron with club soda and salt, stubbornly working at the stain like it was something she could erase. Her fingers were red from friction. Her movements sharp, tense, mechanical. Behind her, Jamal approached gently. "Hey," he said quietly. "You should see what's going down out there," Jamal said softly. Amara didn't respond at first. Her hands continued scrubbing the wine from her apron like she could erase the humiliation with enough pressure. Then she looked up, eyes glassy but dry. "He's confronting her, isn't he?" Jamal nodded slowly. "He's not just confronting her. He's ending her." Out in the dining hall, murmurs had given way to phones held discreetly at chest height. Clips of the incident had already gone viral. Vanessa's smirk, the deliberate toss of the wine, Amara's silent, dignified retreat. The internet was awake and angry. #respect the staff. #Crystal Haven drama. #Amara deserved better. Judgment wasn't waiting for news cycles. It was unfolding in real time. In the private lounge, Vanessa stumbled back a half step, mascara smudged beneath eyes wide with disbelief. "Mr. Brooks, please, I didn't mean." Malcolm raised a single hand. It was neither aggressive nor dramatic, but it silenced her like a gavel against marble. "Your bill is covered," he said evenly. "Consider it a parting gift. But you are no longer welcome here." She blinked, expecting a punchline. When none came, her lips parted, closed again. Then, spinning on her heel, she stormed out, flustered, the shards of her poise trailing behind her. Her friend scrambled to follow, too stunned to speak. And as the doors shut behind them, the dining room erupted, not in outrage, but in something quieter, more powerful. Applause. Not loud, not performative, just steady, sincere, not for the spectacle, but for the justice. Back in the kitchen, Amara let out a breath, long, controlled. Not of relief, not yet, but of something else. Readiness. Because the next chapter wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something more powerful. Her voice. In the lounge just off the grand dining hall, tension clung to the velvet walls and floor-to-ceiling windows like humidity in the air. The Miami skyline glittered in the distance, but no one looked at it. Vanessa stood frozen. One hand hovered over the back of a leather chair, as if still deciding whether she was supposed to sit or flee. Malcolm Brooks had not moved, but his stillness was louder than a raised voice. His presence commanded more than authority. It radiated a kind of gravity that drew truth out of shadows. This wasn't a man built by wealth alone. This was a man carved by storms. And right now, he was a storm for his daughter. Vanessa tried to steady her footing, but confidence had already leaked out of her like air from a punctured tire. "Mr. Brooks," she began, voice syrupy and cracked, "this is all just a terrible misunderstanding. I came expecting the five-star experience your hotel is known for, but instead, you delivered a public assault," Malcolm said, cutting her off with a voice so level it felt like a blade. "You humiliated an employee. You mocked her, laughed, and when she turned her back, you threw wine on her." He paused. Each word dropped like iron. "You did that, Miss Carroll, and you did it in front of people who don't forget cruelty easily." Vanessa blinked rapidly. Panic fluttered in her chest. I didn't realize who she was." Malcolm rose slowly to his full height. Towering, unblinking, a verdict in a suit. "You didn't know she was my daughter?" he asked. "That shouldn't matter. No one deserves to be treated the way you treated her. Not a waitress, not a janitor, not a CEO. No one." He stepped forward, voice quiet but unshakable. "But since you seem so invested in identities, let me clarify something. Amara Brooks is not just my daughter. She is the soul of this hotel. She chose to work here, to wait tables, to carry trays, to face people like you, because she wanted to understand humility. She wanted to build from the ground up. And tonight, you taught her exactly why that matters." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It throbbed with meaning. Vanessa swayed, as if the weight of his words had physically struck her. Her cheeks darkened, not with embarrassment but with revelation. Her mask was gone. She looked around as if searching for someone, anyone, to interrupt, to save her. But no one came. Daniel stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Vanessa's voice cracked. "I thought she was just. She looked like she worked here." "She does," Malcolm said. "And she worked harder in one night than most people work in a week. But that didn't give you the right to degrade her. You didn't see a person, Miss Carroll. You saw a uniform. And that," he said, "is what makes this more than a misunderstanding." Outside the lounge, the dining hall had grown unusually quiet. Voices dipped into whispers. Phone screens glowed softly in the dim light, scrolling viral headlines like a fevered chorus. Socialite drenches server in wine. Hotel owner steps in. Beneath the title, screenshots told the story louder than words ever could. Vanessa's smirk. The arc of wine. Amara's quiet, soaked retreat. Crystal Haven, a name once synonymous with discretion, was now the unlikely theatre for a public reckoning. A lesson not in luxury, but in humanity. Back in the lounge, Malcolm stepped aside and gave a silent nod to Daniel. "Escort Miss Carroll from the premises," he said. "She is no longer welcome here." Vanessa's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The word blacklisted wasn't spoken, but it draped the air like a velvet shroud. And in her world, where access, status, and whispered invitations ruled, being blacklisted from a flagship hotel like Crystal Haven wasn't just a slap. It was a scarlet letter. She turned sharply, clutching her purse like it was her last shield. "This isn't over," she muttered under her breath. But the threat had no teeth, only desperation. Daniel opened the door. Vanessa walked out. At that exact moment, Amara stepped out of the kitchen. She had changed into a clean blouse, hair tied back, apron gone. Her face was calm, but her eyes still held the shimmer of something raw, still burning. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't demanded justice or rallied hashtags, but it had come anyway, from one man, the one who truly saw her. And now, as fate aligned, she stood directly in Vanessa's path. They locked eyes for half a second. Vanessa's gaze broke first. She walked past Amara quickly, jaw tight, her poise now a costume that no longer fit. Her heels clicked like a retreating war drum, and when the doors shut behind her, the entire dining room exhaled. A few guests clapped, quietly, hesitantly, not for spectacle, but for resolution. Then Malcolm stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Let it be known," he said, "to no one and everyone. This hotel respects those who serve with grace. Titles do not matter. Behavior does." He turned toward Amara. Their eyes met across the room. His face, still carved with authority, broke into a quiet, fierce smile. And she, his daughter, nodded in return. No words passed between them. They didn't need any. What passed instead was deeper trust, dignity, and the unspoken understanding that she had not just endured, she had risen. Online, the world was already ablaze. Clips and commentary flooded the timeline. Influencers dissected the scene frame by frame. Former employees of Vanessa emerged with their own stories. It became clear. Amara hadn't just been humiliated. Vanessa had been exposed. And the internet, as always, had receipts. But Amara didn't open her phone. She didn't chase the spotlight, didn't scroll the hashtags. She simply returned to her station, picked up a tray, and walked over to refill a guest's wine. With steady hands. Hands that had once trembled, now unshakable, because she knew exactly who she was. Not just the daughter of a billionaire, not just an employee. She was someone who had been tested, and hadn't flinched. And now, under the same chandelier that had once seen her humiliated, she stood, radiant, unwavering, and deeply, unapologetically human. By sunrise, the marble floors of Crystal Haven gleamed as usual. The whispers of the previous night faded into velvet curtains and clinking glassware. But online, the storm had only just begun. A grainy video, under 90 seconds, had captured everything. Vanessa's voice. "Maybe that'll teach you to pay attention." Then, the splash. And now, over 3 million views on TikTok, X, and YouTube combined. That morning, Amara entered through the staff entrance just after 9 a.m. The break room fell silent. Not in awkwardness. In reverence. Jamal stood first. He held out a fresh coffee. No fanfare. No speeches. Just a warm mug. For a woman who had earned something far greater than sympathy. Respect. "You sure about being here today?" Jamal asked, his voice low. Amara tied her apron with steady hands. Her movements were smooth, practiced. Grounding. Why wouldn't I be? She replied with a soft smile. The uniform didn't change overnight. Neither did I. Her words were simple, but they landed in the room like a vow. She wasn't here for applause. She wasn't here for headlines. She was here to work, as she always had. But the hotel had changed. Guests who once barely looked up now paused when she passed. Some offered small nods, others outright admiration. A middle-aged couple from Chicago stopped her mid-shift, their expressions gentle. "We saw the video," the woman whispered, eyes damp. "You handled yourself with such grace. I hope our daughter grows up with your kind of strength." Amara smiled, thanked them sincerely, and moved on. She didn't linger in praise. She had tables to serve, glasses to fill. Let the world think what it would. To her, this was still her job, and while some now whispered about her as the billionaire's daughter, she refused to let it rewrite who she was. In the lobby, luxury still wrapped around every marble panel and gold-trimmed curtain. But something had shifted. Staff stood taller. Guests paid closer attention, not to scandal now, but to people, to humanity. Because the viral moment hadn't just exposed Vanessa Carroll's cruelty. It had reminded everyone that behind every tray, every apron, was a person, worthy of dignity, of respect. Always. Upstairs, in the executive office, Malcolm Brooks sat behind his desk. Headlines flashed across his screen. "Heiress humiliates server, only to discover she's the hotel owner's daughter. Power meets grace. How one woman's dignity sparked a viral reckoning." He hadn't intended to speak to the press, but a statement had gone out, written with precision and pride. "At Crystal Haven, we believe that dignity is not a luxury. It's a right. We stand by our staff, always." They were his words, and he meant them. But more powerful than any quote or headline was the image on his security feed. Amara, still serving, still pouring coffee, still listening to guests with the same quiet care. She had been dragged through public shame, defended by a father she never asked to speak for her, thrust into a media wildfire, and she had not changed. Not a victim, not a headline, not a heroine basking in vindication, just a woman doing her work, with grace. By early afternoon, the backlash against Vanessa had reached full tilt. Her Instagram went dark. Partnerships were quietly dropped. A former assistant posted a thread. 5 years of verbal abuse. The public only saw one night. A fashion label issued a blunt statement. "We condemn behavior that dehumanizes service workers. Vanessa Carroll's actions do not represent our values." Her perfect image, polished, desirable, untouchable, crumbled under the weight of her own entitlement. Justice had gone viral. But Amara didn't post, didn't gloat, didn't ride the wave. Later that day, a guest tried to press a crisp $100 bill into her hand. "With respect," he said with a wink, "for going viral." Amara offered a warm but firm smile. "I'm not a moment," she said, gently pushing the bill back. "I'm a person," she said. "I'm a person." That line would later ripple across Twitter, quoted in bold fonts and praised as poetic. But to Amara, it wasn't a performance. It was simply the truth. She had no interest in becoming a symbol, not of revenge, not of viral justice. What mattered to her was something quieter, something stronger, the kind of power that doesn't need an audience. Later that evening, after the dinner rush faded and the clinking of glasses gave way to silence, Amara stepped onto the narrow balcony behind the service wing. Above her, the Miami sky blushed in shades of coral, gold, and violet, colors that belonged to endings, but also to beginnings. She leaned against the railing, letting the salty breeze skim her skin. Somewhere in the distance, music drifted faintly through the air. It would have been easy to walk away, to let her father's name shield her, to disappear behind legacy and let the story end. But that would have meant surrendering something far more important, everything she was building for herself, and she wasn't ready to do that. Not now. Not ever. Malcolm joined her quietly. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, breathing in the dusk. Then, gently, "You didn't have to come in today." She glanced at him, then back at the horizon. "Yes, I did," she replied, "because if I didn't, then she would have won." He nodded, his usual composure softened by pride. "The world's watching you now, you know." Amara gave a small smile. "Let them, as long as they see me for who I am." And that was the truth. She wasn't here for pity, not for likes, shares, or sympathy. She was here for her, for the version of herself who had stood in the storm and hadn't flinched, who chose resilience over revenge, who believed that dignity wasn't inherited. It was earned, moment by moment, by the choices you made when no one expected grace. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the skyline, Amara Brooks stood tall in her uniform. The wine stains were long gone, but something far deeper remained, a resolve that couldn't be scrubbed away. She no longer needed to prove anything, not to Vanessa, not to the strangers online, not even to her father. The world could spin its narratives. The headlines could fade, but she knew who she was, and sometimes that's the most radical justice of all. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story of dignity, justice, and quiet strength. What did you think of Amara's choice to keep showing up with grace, especially when no one expected her to? Let us know in the comments below, and tell us where you're watching from. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true-to-life tales that remind us speech balloon respect speaks louder than status. Until next time, stay kind and stay powerful.